Hi everyone, I hope all are fine. Welcome back our geography session, chapter 6, part 2, properties of seawater. In the last part, we have learnt about the two properties of seawater. They are temperature and salinity. And now in this part, we are going to learn the third property of seawater, that is density. Temperature and salinity are the two properties of seawater which controls the density of seawater. That means temperature and the salinity, which is controlling the density of seawater. And in this part we will learn about the relation between the temperature and density and the salinity and the density. So how the two properties such as temperature and salinity is related to the density of seawater. In the last year when you learnt about the ocean currents, we learned that on the surface of the sea or the surface water is hot due to the more temperature. So, when temperature is more, density will be less. That's why the hot water we can see on the surface of the sea. Then, the temperature is less, or in low temperature, the density of seawater will be high. It's just opposite. When temperature is more, the density of seawater is less. When the temperature is less, then the density of seawater will be more. That's why the cold water will be always on the seabed. And the hot water will be on the surface of the sea because of the influence of the temperature in the density of the seawater. As compared to salinity, temperature affect more of this density of the seawater. Now I am going to compare the three properties of seawater. What are changes we can see among these properties of seawater such as temperature, salinity and density according to the depth. According to the depth, lot of changes are occurring in the properties of seawater. Lot of changes or variations we can see in the temperature, salinity and density up to the depth 500 meter. What is the reason for that? Up to 500 meter depth, the ocean water we can call as surface water. That means up to 500 meter. Then in the last year we have learned about the ocean landforms. There we learned about continental shelf. And in the continental shelf we can see more aquatic animals or living organisms in the continental shelf. What is the reason? Because the direct sun rays is reaching there. So because of that, lot of living organisms we can see. The same manner up to 500 meter depth, lot of variations among the temperature, salinity and density we can see up to 500 meter depth. So the water is known as up to 500 meter depth. The ocean water is known as surface water. And what are the reasons for the variation among these three properties up to 500 meter depth? What are the reasons? Sun rays, rainfall, ocean currents, wind, etc. So these factors influence will be more up to 500 meter depth. We know that temperature, it affecting to the salinity and the density of the water. Then how this temperature is affecting or become effective according to the sun rays. Up to what depth the sun rays is reaching more? Up to 500 meter depth. So that influence we can see here. Same manner wind, ocean currents, rainfall, etc. So these factors influence will be more up to 500 meter depth. And after 500 meter, we can see that the variations among these properties of seawater, it is reducing, and after 1500 meter depth, the variation. There will not be that much variations, temperature, salinity and density. That means after 1500 meter depth, the salt properties of seawater will be stable or it will be same. Here we are comparing the three factors. So in these three factors, there will not be that much changes after 1500 meter depth. The reason, the influence of the factors such as wind, ocean currents, sun rays will be less according to the depth is increasing. That is why the changes in the properties of seawater will also be less. Now we are going for a comparative study of temperature, salinity and density with the help of a graph which is given in your textbook page number 55.
So children, you can see the graph here, and it shows the salinity, temperature and density with reference to the depth of the seawater. We know that density of the water is dependent on temperature and salinity. If you see the graph carefully, you will realize that after a certain depth, there is no change in these factors according to the depth. The change can be seen up to a depth of about 500 meter. The slopes of the curves of the graph are varying for all the three factors, but below the depth of 1000 meter, there is no change in all the three factors. Generally, we can call the seawater up to the depth of 500 meter as surface water. This water gets affected by ocean currents and sun rays. That is why we can see lot of variations up to the depth of 500 meter. And we can see the movement of these waters in the form of ocean currents. At greater depths, wind, sun rays and currents do not affect these properties. Because of that, after around 1000 meter depth, there is no change in these three factors. The ocean currents are generated because of difference in the properties of seawater. They act as temperature controllers at the global level. The distribution of temperature gets controlled due to the ocean currents. Thus, the climate of the earth gets affected by ocean currents. Now we will go through the question which is given in your textbook. With increasing depth, what decreases? Answer: temperature. After what depth does the change in these factors become almost zero? Answer: more or less 1000 meter. Here we can see more or less 1000 meter. The change in these factors become almost zero. Next question: till what depth is the change in this factor higher? 1000 meter, we can see the change is higher. Explain the correlation between all the three factors. We have already learned that the temperature, salinity and density, it will be varied up to 500 meter depth, and if temperature is increasing, salinity is also increasing. If low temperature is there, we can see the salinity will also be less. And again, if temperature is decreasing, the density of water may decrease. If temperature is decreasing, then density of seawater may increase. More saline water has lower temperature at the surface, but still the density of such water is more than other water. On the contrary, seawater having higher temperature and low salinity can have lower density.
What all things we have learned in this lesson? What are the properties of seawater? And ocean is the big storage of the water. Sea properties such as temperature, salinity and density, and according to the depth and the latitudes, how these factors are or how the sea properties are varied, and what are the reasons for the variation. So I hope all of you understood. So learn well and do this graph activity. What is given in your textbook page number 55 in your textbook. Read well, learn well. Thank you.